Hey guys, Pete here, picking up with my Game of Thrones Season 8 Problems series today. I'm going to look at Queen Cersei of House Lannister and the problems I see with her story. First, a reminder that I decided to do this series on problems because the ending could go so many different ways. Focusing on problems is a way to work through it, so it's not a series saying Game of Thrones Season 8 will be bad or Game of Thrones is so bad now. I think there's a good chance that the end of the series will be one of the high points of the show altogether, even though there are such high expectations. But when trying to sift through everything we've learned reading and rereading the books and what we've learned watching and rewatching the show, I find it hard to see what a good ending will look like. I'm doing the Cersei video today because I started it the other day and then I shelved it because those new trailers came out. I've decided that I'm going to do a general ending of the story problems video next, since a lot of people disagreed with what I said about Jon in that video in this series. I think I could have done a better job explaining my point of view overall, so I think that making the ending video next in the series rather than at the end will kind of do that. Either way, I want to get through Cersei today because I think she's a lot less controversial. I mean, there are probably some people out there rooting for Cersei to win in the end, but only in the way that there are probably always some people who are cheering for the villain. Let's jump into it. Cersei Lannister is the current Queen of the Seven Kingdoms. She took the Iron Throne for herself after blowing up the Sept of Baelor. She did that to destroy her enemies, the High Sparrow and the Tyrells, but it led her son King Tommen to take his own life by jumping out a window in the Red Keep. Cersei swooped in to take his place, and thus far no one has been able to remove her. She may end up being the very last person to ever occupy the throne, but she probably won't be alive to see if that's what is the case. Tommen was the last of her children. Joffrey and Myrcella died in Season 4 and Season 5, respectively. At the end of the 7th season, she became pregnant again, carrying what would be the 4th child she's had with her twin brother Jaime Lannister. But I don't think that there are many fans out there that expect her to, actually have that child. I mention all of this because it leads us into the first problem. The number one problem with Cersei is that she is a true villain. It's not to say she isn't a complex character. She is, and we'll talk about that some later, but she is definitely a bad guy as far as the story goes. Her villainy has been somewhat restrained because she was also a mother who wanted to protect her children. But at this point, there is nothing holding her back at all. It should be said that she's a good villain, a really good villain, in fact. And I'm not saying that she's some kind of diabolical mastermind. She's not. She actually makes a lot of mistakes. What I mean is that even though there isn't much to like about what she does, she's still a likable character, or at least an enjoyable character to watch. I've talked about this in plenty of videos before. Cersei is one of my favorite characters in the show. A lot of that is Lena Headey's performance, which is amazing, but part of it is also, dare I say, the way that they adapted her character for TV. Last week I was going through her chapters in A Feast for Crows, and I was reminded about the differences in the book and show versions. Usually when you say that, the comparison is how much better the book version is, but in Cersei's case, it's actually the opposite. In the chapters where we get them from Cersei's point of view, you get insights into why she's doing things. Most of this is just related to her paranoia, and it makes her a little less sympathetic to me. Like, she's not as cunning, she's just desperate, maybe is the way you could say that. She has the same motivations more or less, but it comes across better on the screen. It's sort of like when I'm reading, I'm thinking, I'm reading the chapters, I got this voice in my head saying, you're bringing this all on yourself, you paranoid idiot. But when I watch her on the show, I'm just like, damn, that's cold. It's like, she just is more impressive, I think, is what I would say on the show. There aren't any POV chapters from Cersei until the later books, though, so you actually get to know her through the other characters' perspectives, and it's pretty much the same in the beginning of the books as it is in the first, seasons of the show anyway. So it's not like they made some big decision to do it that way. It just turned out that way for the most part, as far as I can tell. But I do think that they've continued to write her pretty well, and like I said, Lena Headey does a really great job of delivering it. But yeah, I mean, after Joffrey dies in the books, more or less, you start to get into her head in point of view chapters, and it's not a good look. If you haven't read the books, it's not really that important in relation to where we are now, but the show version, the super fun to watch Cersei, is the villain, like the villain, and she has nothing to hold her back from doing everything she can to hold on to her power. She's a bit of a cornered animal. This is the second problem with Cersei. Just like I said in my Night King Problems video about him, she can't possibly win. Because she's full on villain mode and she has nothing to lose, there really isn't a path to redemption. I mentioned this in a previous video, but it's a good time to bring it back up. One of the biggest things that stood out to me when I watched the first trailer over and over again was that Cersei had positioned herself to be the real threat. In a world where there is a magical Night King coming to destroy humanity, she has positioned herself to be the bigger threat. In that trailer, you see an existential threat approaching Winterfell. We see our heroes getting ready to fight the battle of their lives in order to save mankind. In the midst of that, we get that shot of Cersei with the satisfied look on her face where she's standing next to Qyburn, and it's just like shit, you know? Some people are worse than magical armies of the dead. Some people will use that threat for their own personal gain. Her brother Jaime couldn't even get on board with that idea, and he had stuck with her up until that point in the show. In the books, they fall out earlier, and she's also much more cruel towards him. Like, I forgot about that a little. But show Jaime has remained loyal until she crossed this line. Of course, this only adds to her not having anything left to lose or anything to hold her back. She's already done a lot of terrible things. I mean, she had her husband killed. When she blew up the Sept of Baelor, that was not just her enemies inside. There were a lot of innocent people involved as well. There were dwarves getting their heads cut off all over the place in her name when she was trying to get Tyrion's head. And that's just to name a few of the things. But going back on her word here is point of no return territory. She's only looking to hold on to her power, and there is no version of an ending that can have her keep that power and still be a good ending. And this leads us to the biggest problem of Cersei's story. How does she get a fitting ending? She is the villain and she has to lose, and I think that means she has to die. But there is some complexity lurking in her story at the same time. On the one hand, sure, she was born into a rich family and she's universally described as beautiful in the books, which makes her situation a lot better than most of the other inhabitants of Westeros. I mean, she is born at the top of the food chain for the most part. That also meant that her primary function was to be married off to another family in order to improve the standing of House Lannister in the system that they live in. That's the way things are in that world, and even high-born women are unable to escape that. Part of her conflict lies in that. You know, she's aware that she isn't treated as an equal because she's born female. She brings this up several times in the story, and it drives some of her decision making. But what really drives Cersei is prophecy. She grows up thinking she's going to marry Prince Rhaegar, like her father tells her this at a very early age. And that's kind of interesting when you think about it, because Rhaegar is another character who was driven by prophecy, and he did all sorts of things that caused a lot of other stuff to happen in the idea that he was trying to follow a prophecy. But she never ended up marrying Rhaegar because Daenerys' dad, King Aerys, aka the Mad King, he started to get... Him and Tywin, Cersei's father, were friends for a very long time, since childhood, and they had this weird power dynamic as Aerys got older and got weirder and madder. So he wouldn't let it happen. But, you know, when she initially goes to see Maggie the Frog, that's who she's talking about when she asks, "When will I wed the prince?" It's not really clear when the prophecy took over her life, but we do know that Maggie said one of the two girls didn't have a future, and that Melara, her companion there, that was the other girl, died that night just as Maggie predicted. This could either be when Cersei started to worry about the prophecy turning out to be true, or she may have played a part in Melara falling into the well in an effort to stop her from repeating what they heard. So either way, it had an effect on her right from the start. But it's interesting because everything Maggie has said turned out to be right. As far as we can tell, her paranoia has had a natural progression as each new part comes true, and by the time we get inside her head, she is consumed by it. And the decisions that she makes are all influenced by it. She's sure Tyrion is the Valonqar. She's sure Marjorie is the younger, more beautiful queen. And this causes her to set things in motion with the Sparrows. She's trying to get rid of Marjorie because she thinks if she can stop that part of the prophecy, then everything else will be done. So that's pretty tragic, right? In her mind, she's making all these decisions because she wants to protect her remaining son. She thinks this, she even says it out loud, she's going around doing things and she's saying, I'm doing it to protect Tommen. And she's been through a lot at this point. She's married off to Robert, it doesn't go well. By the time we meet them in the show, we can tell it's a loveless marriage, but we also learn that he was pretty abusive in the bedroom, especially in the early years of their marriage from the books. She has a child that she clings on to as her one good thing, and he turns out to be a sadistic psycho. He dies. Her father gets killed by her brother. It's not nothing. There's a lot of bad stuff that happens to her. She does all sorts of terrible things in a paranoid response. That gets her locked up by the zealots that she gave power to. She has to do a walk of shame naked in front of everyone. There is actual complexity here, right? And she's terrible. Like I said, she's done what she's done in that true sense of everyone is the hero in their own story. She had her reasons. She did what she thought she had to do based on her situation, but none of what she suffered really makes any of that stuff okay. In the Walk of Atonement sequence in the books, she thinks about Ned when, she's out in the front of the Sept of Baelor. She thinks about how if Joffrey just hadn't followed through with his beheading, how different the story would have turned out. When she dreams of the trip to see Maggie the Frog, she tells herself to turn around, to not listen to what Maggie has to say. It's sort of like she is an actual victim, like stuff happens to her, but she also embodies it to the sense that she turns it outward and she just brings destruction. You know what I mean? She doesn't work on these things constructively. So I guess, on one hand you think, you kind of feel bad for her because, like I said, she's a compelling character and bad stuff has happened to her. But at the same time, she's ruthlessly evil and there's no chance that she's going to do the right thing. You just know that. There's no way she's going to walk away, She's not going to give up power. She's not going to go out without a fight. She'll take everyone down if that's what is the only option. So, how do we get a fitting ending to that? I want to see at least a nod to the complexity of who she was. But, for me, I would almost like to see her recognize the folly of the way that she's done the things that she's done. You understand? I think if she realizes that, all this bad stuff happened to her and then she went out and did all this other terrible stuff, but, she did that. It's sort of she kind of thinks of herself as not responsible because of things that have happened to her. So it'd be really cool if there's some kind of dialogue before her ending where she realizes, you know what? I did this because, she kind of had that point a bit whenever she turned the tables on Septa Unella, but I don't know. It'd be nice to see her have some kind of a coming home inside before she has to actually pass on. I just don't think that she can live. I don't think she's going to turn anything around. Nobody would trust her if she did at this point. So what do you guys think? Do you care? Do you see her as a tragic, complex character, or do you just see her as pure evil and you want to see her go because it'll be fun to watch the villain die? I don't know. I'm really interested to hear what you think. I will definitely be sad whenever I watch the character pass on. It will be a strange moment because, I want it to happen. I definitely don't want her story to go any other way, but it'll be interesting because it's someone that you've followed and thought about and really liked, even though they were terrible for so many years now. And, and she's going to have to go and it's going to be interesting. So like the video if you enjoyed it. Like I said, I am going to do a general problem with the endings video next. I'm going to try to get that out real soon. So if you want to follow along, you can subscribe. You know what to do there. Thanks for watching, guys. I will talk to you soon.